Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about a new film called The Roofman. This is a film that stars Channing Tatum, Kirsten Dunst, Peter Dinklage, and I believe Ben Mendelsohn as well. And in this film, you guys, it's actually based off of a true story. You can find articles, links, just information overall online. Sorry, I'm just in my camera there to make it look a little bit better. But yes, you can find real information about this Roofman character. He was a real person. It is based off a true story. Um, it's based off of a man named Jeffrey Manchester who went through this really rough divorce, and he kind of resorted to this life of crime of robbing McDonald's restaurants and Toys R Us's and all this other stuff. And so basically, on his first time out of getting out of jail, basically escaping from prison, he manages to basically um, find this huge like bulk in the wall where he could basically live inside of a Toys R Us and live there rent free and roam the store at nighttime and stuff like that, and is even able to kind of disable the security camera so he can really kind of take what he needs from the Toys R Us store and kind of live off the land there. But things start to get complicated when he starts falling for a Toys R Us employee that's played by Kirsten Dunst. Her name is Lee, and Lee and him meet through this like church get together. There's this um, toy donation thing that they both meet at that Kirsten Dunst's boss was originally invited to come to, but instead um, Jeffrey Manchester, who's played by Channing Tatum, chooses to go to this instead. And basically, the two of them kind of start falling for each other. Channing Tatum gets a chance to basically get to know the daughters and all this other stuff. So they start getting really close, but things really start to get out of hand when Jeffrey Manchester is starting to get caught that he is living inside this Toys R Us. So basically, it's under full investigation. Jeffrey Manchester, at this point in the story, has to figure out what's he going to tell his new girlfriend, who's Lee, played by Kirsten Dunst, and what exactly is his next step. Is he just going to turn himself in? Is he going to find a way to move out of the country? He has a friend of his that's good about changing identities and all this other stuff that you'll learn in this movie. So there's all these options available to him, but he basically has to make a choice quick because this Toys R Us is under investigation, and the police are basically hot on his trail, and he's been hot on their trail for months now, and so he has to make a decision, and he has to make it quickly. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed The Roofman quite a bit. This is a very unique, original movie that's based off a true story, based off a very unique person, and I think that's what I loved about this movie so much is it captures that uniqueness. It is such a unique, true story that you just are kind of dying to find out more just because it is so weird and unique and different and out there. There's just so much to love about this film. So I do want to go over some positives and negatives as to why I feel this way. Well, it's not an absolutely perfect film, but there's a lot of things to certainly love about it, and I do want to go over both positives and negatives as to why I feel this way. So first and foremost, my first positive is this is a very unique and original story. It really does feel very different than other bank robbery stories and other stories about criminals out there just because Jeffrey Manchester's story is just so different from everything else. The fact that he did try to rob McDonald's and that he escaped from prison and has this whole thing going on with this woman that he's no longer seeing but has kids with, and living off of this Toys R Us and basically doing things outside of the Toys R Us to kind of make him feel human again, make him feel good about going to church and having a girlfriend again and all this other stuff. It's just a very unique story, and I think that's just what I love about this movie so much. It's just so different from everything else. It's not a blockbuster. It's not a superhero story. It's not based off a comic book. This was a real person that once existed in real life and is still serving time in prison for these crimes and stuff. But it's just very unique and very different, and it's just such a unique experience compared to almost anything else you can find in a theater right now. And like I said, that's just something I really appreciate about this film. I also like the store set designs that they use for the Toys R Us's, for the McDonald's, even for the Blockbuster stores that Jeffrey kind of is working around the story and that we see him witness running around and stuff. I just love the feeling of the late 90s, early 2000s vibe that they went with this movie. They definitely go with the technology that was available at the time, what foods were available, what the prices were. That really kind of got to me too, is just how much cheaper McDonald's was back then compared to now, unfortunately. Um, but the set designs are really good. It really does feel like you're inside this Toys R Us in the early 2000s whenever Jeffrey Manchester's roaming around them. It just really does feel like a point in time that does not exist anymore, and they really capture that moment in time of late 90s, early 2000s, and what would really that be like to go to a McDonald's or go to a Toys R Us at that time. I feel like they captured that perfectly. And overall, too, I think this is just a really unique role for Channing Tatum. It's just he's not just the good-looking guy like he is in a lot of other movies. He really does play this guy that really is very troubled and very conflicted and very much in a survival instinct mode, and very much about what does he have to do to survive, what's foods available to him, where can he go to the bathroom, where can he shower, what's a safe time to go to the Toys R Us, when's a bad time to go there, when's a good time to exit the Toys R Us, what do you have to do to not get caught on security cameras, all these stuff he has to consider over the course of the movie. And it's just a very unique role for Channing Tatum. There's even a little bit of like a risky business moment too, where he's kind of dancing around in his underwear in this Toys R Us, and it's just a very different role for him. And I think that's just what I like about it so much. I don't know if he'll get an Oscar for this, but it's a very, very good performance. And if he does get Oscar nominated for it, good on him. I really hope he takes on more roles like this. I also like how Jeffrey Manchester have very, very special quirks that he has whenever he is robbing a store, is robbing a restaurant. He kind of has this feeling of, making sure the people are okay while he's still kind of doing the things that he's trying to do. He doesn't really hurt anybody. They kind of play off of that a little bit later in the movie, and I won't go into spoiler territory, but for the most part, everybody is kind of okay. They get put in the freezer, or basically they get put in somewhere so he can get away with the stuff that he's trying to get away with. But I do like how he has these special quirks and special ways of kind of approaching things, and so I like how the film is able to maintain that over the course of the movie. And I also just like how unique this true story is. It really is very different from everything else. It really is a true story that you just really can't believe really existed to somebody, and that somebody really went through all this, and that this guy with this really unique skill set, rather than pursuing a really great job like you hope he probably would have if he went on a better path. It really is just a very unique story that's unlike anything else. I also like how the film kind of gives you this complicated emotion. I know not everybody's going to like that part of the movie, but I personally really like that. I like how there are moments that make you feel happy and satisfied, while there's also moments that make you feel kind of bad about the people that Jeffrey Manchester has probably harmed, or has scared, or has traumatized, or regarding him. It's just regarding, survival instinct and what he has to do to get from day to day. And I do like how complicated and emotionally I felt by the time the film was over with, because you are thrown in a lot of different kind of scenarios with this Jeffrey Manchester character. And by the time the film was over with, I feel like I've been through several different aspects of his life. And I feel like when you're covering roughly 7 years of a person's life and you're able to fit that into a 2-hour film in a satisfying way, I really feel like that's a very worthy thing you've done with your screenplay to really make it feel worthwhile for the audience. I also like how well written some of these side characters are. There's a character that's played by LaKeith Stanfield that's trying to help Channing Tatum basically leave the country when things are starting to get really bad. And I really like how developed his character was. He's not just kind of there for 1 or 2 scenes. He's kind of in there throughout most of the movie. And whenever he is there to help Channing Tatum get out of this tough scenario that he runs into, I like how developed his character was, how involved in kind of where he was when Jeffrey was breaking out of prison and doing the McDonald's thing and doing the Toys R Us thing and all this other stuff. I just like how well written his character was, and how well written some of these other side characters were over the course of the story as we see them be supportive to the main characters. But for my negatives of Roofman, unfortunately there is a lot of on and off humor in this movie, and I also feel like there's times in the story where the comedy isn't necessarily chosen in the most wise way it could have. Like there's scenes where Jeffrey Manchester is trying to rob the very Toys R Us that he's living in, and there's a security person that really gets hurt really badly, and the film tries to play it up for laughs, and I really just felt kind of bad watching it. And there's just scenes like that where Even though it is kind of played up for laughs, where himself giving a coat to like a McDonald's employee and stuff like that. There is just another part of me that does kind of knowingly know that there probably was real McDonald's employees that really were scared and traumatized based off of all these things that he was doing. So there is times in the movie where I feel like it could have chose its humor a little bit more wisely, because there is times too where you have to factor in that these are real people that he probably traumatized to do all the things that he did. I also thought less time could have been spent on Jeffrey Manchester's romantic life with this lead character played by Kirsten Dunst. They do spend a lot of time on it, and I definitely feel like why it's there, and I definitely get why they spent a lot of time there. For me personally, if I was in the editing room, though, I probably would have trimmed that down pretty significantly. I think you keep it. I think you keep Kirsten Dunst as a significant character. I think their relationship, though, is just, it gets a little bit pushed too much in the forefront more than it should. I just felt like the more interesting things the film offered was the whole unique aspects of the story, and why he chose the Toys R Us and how he got it, and how he got through it, and how he survived off the baby food and the candies, and how he got money and all this other stuff. And I felt like the romantic aspect of his life wasn't as interesting. Like, there's things in it, I totally see why it's there. I'm not saying to get rid of it, but I feel like a lot of time is spent there. I think the best possible version of the Roofman would be the version that less time is spent there. And also, by the time the film was over with, I really didn't quite understand if the director was telling me that Jeffrey Manchester was a good or a bad person. Because I feel like for every point that says that he was good, there's also just as many points saying that he was bad. And I think that was kind of the point. It was that he was this person with mixed feelings that you're supposed to have by the time the film is over with. But for me personally, I would have liked to have seen this director kind of take a side as to where he stands with Jeffrey Manchester. If he's a good person, then you really have to make the point that he is serving prison while still being a good person. But if he's a bad person, I think it really should have been struck home more that he's serving time in prison. He absolutely needs to be there, and he's a bad person because of this, this, and this, and this, or a fifth point if you need to make a fifth point. And also, the person I saw this with made a good point also. I feel like the jig would have been up sooner if he really was doing the things that he was doing. Like, there's scenes where him and Lee meet up for a date, the Kirsten Dunst character, and at never any point in time in the movie does she get suspicious that he doesn't have a car or has transportation home, or never gives out his address. He pretends that he works for the government and all this other stuff you'll learn in the movie, but there's a lot of times where I think if he truly was in love with her, I think he would try probably sneak in some details at least as to where he would live or where they can meet up for consistently and things like that. And also too, a lot of his theft within the Toys R Us store, like how he got away with the candies and the baby food and taking the kids' mattresses and the kids' shirts and all this other stuff. I feel like that kind of stuff would have been found out more quickly, and his whereabouts would have found out more quickly if he really was doing that. I feel like just more investigation would take place if Toys R Us really had that much of a theft problem. And so by the time the film is over with, you do kind of wonder how 6 months could have passed at this Toys R Us and not more action was taken as to the theft issue. But overall, I'm going to give The Roofman a 9 out of 10. I think it's a wonderful film. There's tons of things I love about it. I love how it's unique and original, and there's a lot of complicated emotions I feel while watching it intentionally. But like I said, a couple of negatives along the way. I really feel humor-wise, the film could have found its comedy a little bit better, obviously, but a couple of other negatives like I mentioned from before. But it is a 9 out of 10 for me. I really do recommend the film. I highly recommend seeing it. If Channing Tatum gets any kind of Oscar buzz, or if this film gets any kind of Oscar buzz, totally worthwhile and totally great, and I totally, worth all the buzz. And I just highly recommend seeing this film, and hopefully it will get award buzz closer to Oscar season.